Welcome to the first webinar in the CCC series. Today we're going to be looking at the action plans, and we're going to be particularly looking at the takeaways from the first submission window that was held earlier this year. As I said, this is part of 3 webinars that combined make up the 3 elements of the CCC. This includes the action plans today, the investment plan, and the commitments documents. And in particular, to note on the webinar on the 6th of June on commitments document is that the second half of that is going to be about next steps and the timeline of window 2, which we have shared previously, but if anyone has any questions around that, they can feel free to join that webinar where we'll have a Q&A around next steps as well. So my name is Thomas Haddock, and I'm one of the 2 NetZeroCities program managers at EIT Climate-KIC. And just to give a bit of context for this webinar, just very briefly wanted to give you an outline of where we've come from and what we want to share. Now, most of you will be aware of this already, I would imagine, but we held our window 1 submission for the Climate-KIC contracts with submission to NetZeroCities required by the middle of March to then go to the commission route in the middle of April. And we had it was quite short notice for window 1, but still we had a decent number of cities mobilized very quickly to submit some really high quality work and strategies. And today we wanted to take the opportunity, particularly as we start to look forward to window 2, where we're expecting a significantly larger number of cities to be submitting. We wanted to really capture those lessons learned that for us, from 2 sides of the coins. We wanted to capture some lessons learned from some cities and also some lessons learned from our side in NetZeroCities in providing the feedback and the completeness check. So today we're going to hear a presentation from Valencia, followed by a Q&A, who submitted a very strong action plan. So we're great to hear from them today. We'll be hearing from Jordi Peris, who's the city strategy coordinator, and potentially also from Fermín, Cerezo, Peco, who may join later in the webinar. Then we're going to hear from Manine, again, another very strong action plan. With a Q&A option as well. And we're going to hear from Agnes Schoenfelder, who's a local Green Deal officer, spokesperson to EU Green Deal, International Climate Policy Advisor, and the CO to Climate Action Agency. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with some presentations from my colleagues, who will be looking at the other side of the coin, as I said, in particular, the takeaways we have from providing the feedback and support to those cities in window 1, where we're going to hear from Andrea Galbadon Moreno, Akatif, and Eugenie Catron from Dark Matter Labs. So with that, and in order to keep it moving, I'm now going to pass over to Valencia. So Jordi, if you would like to, I'll stop sharing my screen if you'd like to share yours, and we can move into the Valencia presentation. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you very much, NetZeroCities, for giving us the opportunity to share here with all of you the work that we have been doing in the last months in the development of our climate action plan for the climate mission. I'm going to share a presentation. So I have this presentation, and I'm gonna share with you some key ideas on how we have been developing our climate action plan. Okay, I will start presenting what and how we define our climate ambition. According to the mission expectation, we define our commitment of achieving a climate neutral cities for scope 1 and 2 in the year 2030. And specifically, we defined some key deep demonstrators that we would use in our city in order to advance and to accelerate that climate transition, because what we were quite clear about is that the mission is about accelerating transformations. So we needed to be precise in define which would be the specific areas or the specific sectors in which we were trying to accelerate this transition in order to demonstrate that it was going to be able to transfer to another spaces. So we work together with another institutions in the city, particularly the ones you can see on the slide. First, the two public universities of Valencia, and we signed a climate agreement, what we call the climate binomial between the city council and the public university, in which they commit to become neutral, their campus to become neutral in 2030, and also they commit themselves to establish and to conceive their campuses as living labs for the city, as spaces for experimentation, in order to transfer and to dialogue with the city, in order to transfer the solutions that were implemented in the campus as safe spaces in other areas of the city. We defined also 3 areas of special interest in our city. The first one was the port of Valencia, which is an important source of emissions in our city, and they committed and they are developing a climate action plan in order to become climate neutral in 2030. We also work together with the Marina of Valencia as a hub for entrepreneurship and innovation, and we define also L'Horta of Valencia, the orchard surrounding our city, as a very particular, a very special and very differential element and a feature of our city, as another special interest area because of its potential in terms of producing sustainable food for the city. And then additionally, we decided to work in those 2 sectors of activity that we consider that could be as exemplar: the sustainable tourism and the public administration sector. With all of this, I mean, we defined a vision for our city that aimed to go beyond the current mission, and we incorporated the ambition of getting the Scope 3 neutrality for 2040. And specifically, we defined our Valencia 2030 climate mission as a mission that includes both the adaptation and the mitigation missions of the European Commission, because we thought that it was necessary to work in an integrated way to integrate mitigation with adaptation, because we could find that way very specific and very important synergies for our project. Okay, our approach is, I think, it's a bit specific, a bit differential of the projects of other cities, because we have combined our mission perspective with our urban strategy perspective. In fact, we have included all the action that we are going to develop in the framework of our mission, of the Valencia Climate Mission, into the action plan of our urban strategy. That way, we combine public policies derived from the 2030 agenda and the urban agenda with the innovation policies that are linked to the mission project. For us, public policies and innovation policies are what we said, or what we call, the 2 sides of the same coin in our urban climate mission. That way, we have defined a city model, which of course aims to be climate neutral, but also embraces another strategic key elements for the city. We say that we aim to be a healthy city, a sustainable city, an entrepreneurial city, a shared city, a creative city, and above all, a Mediterranean city. We need to find the Mediterranean way to climate neutrality as our specific way to reach the mission goals. That way, we define 12 strategic lines, 48 strategic goals, 30 programs, 192 guidelines for action, and 130 indicators. These are different elements of our urban strategy, and our climate mission is embedded into this 192 guidelines for action, our mission is embedded in the 30 programs of our urban strategy. That way, we merge and we mix all the public policies we are going to develop in the coming 10 years with all the innovation policies we are going to develop and that need to nurture and transform these public policies. And this is a very key element for our approach. That way, we have defined our Valencia's climate action plan in a systemic and holistic way. And we have defined, consequently, 6 domains of impact, which are related to mobility and transport, energy, economy and industry, renaturalization, housing and buildings, urbanism and habitat. These are the domains of impact into the mission. And we have also defined what we have called the systemic action domains, where we can find civic engagement, alliances and networks, policy, finance and law, regulation, communication, innovation and technology, smart city and data, just and fair transition, etc., etc. And all the actions that we are going to develop within these impact domains and systemic action domains come from our Valencia 2030 urban strategy. We have mission and the strategy totally aligned in our Valencia climate action plan. And this is the way we have tried to integrate the climate action plan in the whole and cross-cutting public, with the whole and cross-cutting approach to the whole public policies we are developing from the City Council and other institutions. Okay, one of the things we did to do that action plan was to identify the current state of climate emission and to do our emissions inventory. And okay, we, of course, defined our baseline situation that was previously defined in the action in the Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan we have already approved in the city, and that we updated through additional tools that were based in the economic model developed by material economics, and that was used by the Spanish cities belonging to the network CTS 2030, the Spanish platform for climate neutrality. We use this model to identify the most cost-effective decarbonization strategies for our city based on the material economics model. And that way, it helped us to make a projection of the current situation into the future. And the economic model, therefore, allowed us to identify which would be the future scenario if we compare a business as usual scenario. I mean, if we continue doing what we are doing now, what would be the scenario, and what would be the scenario if we really are able to implement the climate action plan. And the conclusions are really interesting. Okay, I mean, the important issue concerning our model to count the emissions of the cities is that it was a bottom-up situation in which we gather a lot of real and going on data from the city, and the learnings were really important, and you can see it. You can see them here. The main learning is that if we continue doing things as we are doing it now, if we project our business as a usual model, then the situation is in 2030 will be more or less the same to the situation that we have nowadays. If we don't implement our climate action plan, due to the general trends that we will have in the city, we will be in exactly the same situation that we are now. Consequently, we define three main learnings. First, it is necessary to accelerate transformation. Second, this model allowed us to identify the main causes of the problem that was related, of course, to electricity generation, transportation, and energy consumption of buildings and the built environment. And also, we identified some limitations of our model, in the sense that it was a very standard model that was not able to capture some of the specificities that we have in our city. For instance, the emission of our harbor. We needed to complement this standard model from materials economic with some specific sources of emissions that were present in our city. Okay, with all this information, we defined some pathways towards climate neutrality by 2030, we construct that way our climate action plan that, as I mentioned before, was derived from our Valencia 2030 urban strategy. Somehow, they were derived from the four elements from the economic model: the transportation, building and heating, electricity, and waste. But as I mentioned before, we needed to complement it with other actions that were relevant for our climate mission and were not considered in the economic model that we were using. So these limitations, we needed to complement them in order to have a holistic and integral action plan for addressing climate change in our city. And they were mainly related to renaturalization, biodiversity and resilience, economy and industry, and urbanism and habitat. That way, we defined our programs, lines of action, and demonstrative projects, and crossing all the programs from our Valencia urban strategy. One important issue here is that 90% of the actions that are included in our urban strategy have an impact on the Valencia 2030 climate mission. This is really relevant because it shows clearly how this combination of urbanized agenda perspective and mission perspective has enabled us to develop an urban strategy that clearly faces the challenges of climate change in our city. Here you can see, I mean, mainly you can't see anything, but we have a table in which we establish a link between our strategic intervention in our different subsector of our urban strategy, and then it's linked with the different impact domains of our climate mission, and also our systemic domain. I think that Fermín has just joined the webinar. Fermín, if you want to switch on your camera, welcome. And thank you for the effort. And if you want to complement whatever I'm saying, you are more than welcome.
Thank you, Jordi. Sorry for the delay.
Well, and then we have some, we would like to just to share with you some of our more important portfolio of transformative actions that we have incorporated in our portfolio of actions from our climate action plan. The first is the Valencia City of Squares and Pedestrians. It's a project that we have in our urban strategy, and we think it's really a key project for our climate mission. Just for giving you a data, in the last years, more than 150,000 square meters have been recovered for pedestrianization in our city in the last years. And as you can see in the picture, one of the main squares of our city that was inaugurated recently. Another of our project is the constitution of a municipal company for sustainable energy as a joint venture, public and private, in order to install and produce renewable energy in public buildings and public spaces. Our aim is to produce 72 megawatts with an investment of 72 million euros in more than 500 buildings and public spaces of the city. And what I think is more important in this project is to create a new instrument, a new tool in order to advance and to accelerate our capacity to install renewable energy production plants in the city. As the first that we are installing nowadays, which is the plant on the roofs of all our cemeteries, a project that we have named the Requiem in Power project, and that will be the largest public urban solar power plant in Spain when we fully install it. We're just starting to install all these plant cells on the roofs of the cemeteries, and it will enable us to produce 2.7 megawatts of energy. Additionally, we have another Valencia Green and Biodiversity Plan in which we have foreseen and defined all the green areas in the city, with the ambition of increasing the city green areas to 11.79 square meters per inhabitants in the coming years. And also, and just to illustrate the idea, one idea that is very important for our climate mission is that when we talk about the Valencia climate mission, we talk about both the city's mission and the adaptation mission, and we work it together with the regional government, incorporating this sort of territorial approach to adaptation and to resilience. For that reason, one of our key projects in the climate mission and also in the action plan of our urban strategy is the regeneration of the beaches of the south of the city that protect a very important and protected natural area, which is the Albufera, a wetland which is protected, which is very important in terms of biodiversity and also in terms of migration of birds from south to north, so from Africa to south to north of Europe. So it's a very important natural area in the city, and that we need to establish strategies and specific projects in order to maintain and to keep it protected from other actions, for instance, related to the harbor of Valencia, which can damage and challenge the future of this natural area. And finally, just to finish our presentation, we would like to talk about the organizational and institutional arrangement that we have created. Maybe, Fermín, if you want to explain that part, and that way you finish the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. For our climate city contract includes these organizational and governance innovation interventions that Jordi was talking about, because we have learned that we cannot do this alone by ourselves. So we had to create some new instruments like the Valencia mission teams and the Valencia mission community, in order to break the silos that we had within the municipality and within the foundations and enterprises belonging to the municipality. Moreover, we created what we call the mission, the Valencia's mission networking transition team with leaders, and I'm sure that Jordi talked before about the distributed leaderships that we need to find in our society, coming from the private sector, the public sector, the academia, the universities and the research institutes, and also coming from the civic society. We add a 5 helix coming from the mass media, because we think in our climate city contract that the mass media has to be involved. That's what we call, with those leaders, to show and anticipate the transformation and the transition. That's what we call the Valencia Mission Network Transition Team, which was one of the suggestions that the NetZeroCities platform offer us in one of the guides. And overall, we talk about the Valencia Mission Alliance, coming also from the 5 helixes from our ecosystem, economic and innovation ecosystem, working from the activity sectors or whatever technologies and source of knowledge that they are involved. Our task in the next year, in the next 2 years before the revision of our climate city contract, is to search and add all those leaderships that are taking place in our city to the climate city contract. We are looking for the adhesions of all those actors, multi-actors that are taking place in Valencia, and that's something that we are boosting under the name of Valencia's Mission Alliance. Jordi, if you can push to the next slide. So these are the 3 levels that we are going to work. We are already working in order to have new adhesions to the climate city contract, coming from all those the entire ecosystem. And that's all. The economic, the last slide shows how the economic model that Jordi ensured that refers before gave us also some estimated cost of the actions and the simulations, and also some operational cost savings and co-benefits that we include in the climate investment plan as the business model, economic model of this transition. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any question or comment or whatever, is more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Jordi and Fermín. That was a really insightful presentation, and it's great to hear a bit about the pathway you've been on. We do have 10 minutes now for Q&A, so feel free to put questions into the chat bar at the bottom. You can see there's a Q&A button there, and you can add questions there. Well, just to kick things off, I'll ask a question to give people time to write in there. But just to kick things off, so I think it was really interesting to hear about the network transition team you presented there, particularly the multi-level governance side of things. And I think as you talked through the presentation, you focused around the Cities 2030 platform, working with other Spanish cities, as well as working with the regional level across the adaptation and mitigation. How advantageous has it been to take that multi-level governance approach when developing your action plan?
Well, I think it has been essential. I mean, because what we always say, I mean, this is not a project of the city council. It cannot be. I mean, in Spain is a very decentralized country, so a lot of the competences rely on our regional government. So, of course, when we needed to define our action plan, it was absolutely necessary to incorporate the competences from the central state, the competences of the regional government, and also the competences of the city council, because otherwise there would have been a lot of important impact measures that wouldn't have been taken into account. And additionally, it has also helped us to incorporate other actions from other different actors. For us, this is a multi-level governance approach, but also multi-stakeholders. So that's something that maybe Fermín can elaborate a little bit, but is related to our city alliance, in which we have invited a lot of very different stakeholders to commit and to join the mission project. Private companies, supermarkets, very different institutions, and to define their own commitments in order to contribute to the city's mission.
Just adding to what Jordi said, we used to say here in Valencia that this is obviously a collective journey, no, rather than an individual destination, and that's what the mission gives us, the sense of working. How you stop talking about yourself or about what you do, and start talking about what has to be achieved, you know, about the purpose, you know, of all this. And that's something that helps in order to engage companies, engage association, engage the ecosystem. That's something that is useful. It's really useful. The vision concept in order to engage them. For example, we have in our Mission Alliance, we have a program where we call the Ambassadors Organization, and we have almost 200 ambassadors. Most of them representing, most of them are association of enterprises working in a determined and concrete cluster, and representing almost 2,000 enterprises or enterprises or corporations, and that wouldn't be possible without the mission, we believe.
Great, thank you. We've got quite a few questions coming in now, so I will jump through a few of these. So we've got a question here from George at Klagenfurt. So how did you calculate the impacts of your actions? And if possible, can you share some details of a selected action?
The impacts, I assume that they are talking about the impacts on the decarbonization. And that's something that we are expecting right now to come from some instructions and guidelines, common guidelines from the mission. We didn't have, you know, when we were completing our first Climate City contract, the clear instructions on how we are going to measure the impacts of every single action that we had in our portfolio of transformation. What we used in this first Climate City contract was a top-down approach, calculating the overall, you know, the emissions, you know, in a top-down approach from the CCAP coming from the 2019, and also we use the other approach, the bottom-up approach, that gave us the economic model coming from material economics. That's the only thing that we have right now, you know, about the direct impact on the decarbonization. I'm waiting to have some new instructions or models coming from the overall action. What we understood is that the Climate City contract is a process, is a continuous process, is a cycle process, and that's something that we are going to have to improve every year, you know, or every 2 years, sending to the European Commission, and every year making it better, you know, in our data and our approach. And some common guidelines for 112 cities would be really appreciated, you know, coming from the European Commission.
Yeah. I think that that raises a very important question, because, I mean, as Fermín explained, we just have used a model. We have some data about the city, and we transform this data into an estimation of our emissions. But what maybe would be very necessary would be to have a common way of measuring the emissions of the 112 cities in this project, because, I mean, it would be really important, I mean, to have a shared orientation and a shared way of measuring that. And we expect that NetZeroCities or the Commission, together with the city, define that way of measuring the emission in these specific projects, and maybe also measuring it and also certifying it, because, I mean, we expect to reach some goals and we have a commitment, but we need to have also clarity on how it's going be taken into consideration afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, great, thank you. So we've probably only got time for one more question. I see there is lots of questions, so we will capture these and we'll try to answer them and follow up after the webinar. But for the next question, I see we've got two questions asking a little bit of a similar focus around the transition team. So how do you get people on board to join the mission teams, and how much their dedicated capacity is dedicated to mission work, and what is the main motivation? In the city in question from Adela, they're having some issues with people being overloaded with work, but we know that they're going to need to involve them as well, like you presented in your presentation. So I wonder if you could offer a bit of an overview of how you structure your team, and if you have any advice for other cities.
Well, let me start, Jordi, because I suffer this one. So this question. So probably this is an excellent question. What we understood and what we learned at the beginning when we start this way and this journey, in 2020-21, is that you are not going to have people waiting to be called to join to the mission team. You don't have people without tasks, without a job, without waiting, to be called. What you have to do is to put in the people's and teams agenda the mission issue. The first thing that you have to do. It's not like we don't have anything to do, and then we are just waiting to be called to be joined to the mission team. The first thing that you have to do in like a management, organizational management, is the teams that you already have, has to be working on the agenda of the mission. That means start working some other things maybe that doesn't impact on the mission or has a less impact on the mission. And the other thing that we know and we say clearly from the cities, we will raise our voice to share it with Europe. And the European Commission, is that we need more people working on this. That's a key issue. We need green and sustainable jobs working on this, not only in the society and in the ecosystem, but also in the public sector. We need to create a task force working on this, because we are trying to do something that is impossible to do. So the people that we have first have to fulfill the agendas with tasks related with the mission, and second, we will need new people. That's the approach that we are using in Valencia. It's not like we have to learn to refuse the way they say, well, if I want to do this, I need more people. No, first you have the people that you have has to be working on this, and then second, you will need more people.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll wrap up there and move on to the next item. So thank you very much, Jordi and Fermín. That was a great presentation, and thank you for answering those questions. There are some questions in the Q&A button at the bottom, so do feel free to go in there and type answers if you would like. We will also capture them at the end.